Hi, my name is Chad, and today I'm going to show you how to make stickers on the Roland. This is the SG540, and for the sake of this instructional video, I'm going to assume you already have some knowledge of how to use Adobe Illustrator, and I'm going to use some terminology. Alright, but we are going to be making stickers, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to load in the correct media, and that would be this one up here. If you don't know which media that you need to put in, usually there's a label on the inside that says what it is. Okay, so we're going to take our roll of media and we're going to put it onto these media holders. They can slide around freely. I would suggest that you push this one on the left all the way to the side so that it doesn't move when you put the media on. So I'm just going to fit this little hole onto this here. And slide the other one down so that it stays in place. Okay. Now this thing can move freely, but you need to be pushing it from the opposite side that you're going to be moving it. So if I'm moving it to the right, I need to be pushing from the left, and likewise from the other side. Okay. Now you have to feed this media through this little slot in the machine. And you have to make sure that it is straight and taut. Usually I would recommend that you use 2 people to do this. But it's not always necessary, especially not for smaller pieces. Okay, now that we have this thing in place, I have to make sure that the edges of this paper are aligned with these blue pieces of tape on the other side of the machine. Now you can't see those from this side of the machine, so I've gone ahead and marked where those are with these little black lines, and they're located all throughout the machine. So I need to take the edge of this and make sure that both of them are at least close enough to the insides of those blue lines. So now that I think that it's in the right spot, I'm going to tighten this little screw down so that this doesn't slide off while it's actually printing. Okay, now that both of those are clamped down, and I'm sure that this thing is not crooked and is within the blue piece of tape on the other side, I'm going to pull down this lever, and that's going to close down the wheels on the other side to make sure this thing doesn't fall back on me. So I'm going to lock that down and go to the other side. Okay, now before we continue, I'm going to describe a few accessories that are required for this. We have these, which are called pinch rollers, and they help keep the media down and also roll it back and forth. We have these, which are media clamps, and they help add stability. These are added on the sides in these little white pieces of plastic. I'll show you where those are later. And then this helps with peeling the backing off of stickers. This is just an X-Acto blade. Make sure it has a fine point. Okay, now we can continue. Come over here, please. So, on this side of the machine, which I described earlier, there are these blue pieces of tape that we see again. These are required, and what these do is, these are the places that you nest the pinch rollers. Now, there's a difference between this pinch roller and this one here. And you might notice that it's the blue piece of tape. These are mandatory, and these need to stay on the very edge of the paper. These are optional, and these are just for adding stability. With a larger piece of media, you would add more of these. With a smaller, you might not use any at all. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to move this pinch roller with the blue piece of tape as comfortably far as possible to the edge. So, I'm going to lift up this lever over here while putting my hand on the media so it doesn't slide back. So I'm going to lift that up. That's going to release the wheels so I can move them freely. So, that's close to the edge and still within the blue piece of tape. And this is close to the edge and also in the blue piece of tape. I'm going to lock it down again so I can grab some of these. Right? I'm going to lift this thing back up again. Now these are inserted perpendicularly on this rail, and they start right here. This is the entry point. It's this little alcove with orange on it. You can slide them down. They also need to stay within the blue pieces of tape. I'm going to add all of them. This is a very large piece of media. Okay, now that they're all in place, I'm going to lock it down again. I'm going to grab these. For smaller pieces of media, this might not be necessary. For the larger ones, these are. If you don't use these, there is a high probability that the ends here will pinch, and these help reduce that from happening. So, as I should probably show you, this gets loaded on this little white piece of plastic, and you need to align the edges of this paper with these two little holes right here. So I'm going to pop that on and then align it. And similarly on this side, the edge of the paper is visible inside of these holes as well as the metal underneath, and that's how you can tell that they're aligned. Okay, so we're done with that part. I'm going to close this. This thing is going to ask you to hit enter, and that's going to take the motor inside and run it along the width of the media. And what it's measuring isn't the actual media itself, it's measuring the distance between those blue pinch rollers that we placed on the edges of the paper. So I'm going to hit enter, it's going to start up the motor, and then it's going to read us what the size of the media is. And that'll be displayed here. And while it's doing this, I should also mention that anytime you lift the glass in the front of the printer, or you jostle these at all, it'll set off a sensor that tells this thing to stop everything it's doing. If it's happening during a print, usually it's not an issue. You can hit enter and it'll start again. But if it's doing cutting, it can cause the motor to jam and then you'll have to start your print all over again. So just try to avoid bumping these while it's printing. Okay, now as you can see, this reads as 52 inches. When we go back over to the computer, we should also see that number there. But before we do that, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to make sure that the blade is not dull, and I'm also going to make sure that we have the proper print settings loaded for this particular piece of media. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do the cut settings. So I'm going to go to function, I'm going to go down to cut config. There it is. I'm going to go to the right. Whoops. I'm going to do a test cut. And what that's going to do is it's going to cut a small circle and a square. Oh, it jammed. This is what we got our X-Acto blade for. Now sometimes this is hard to see, but in here there should be a little white circle and a square. And I'm just going to take the edge of this X-Acto blade and try and lift up the circle without removing the square. I'm not very fond of this type of sticker material, but as you can see, we did lift the square without we did lift the circle without removing the square. So the cut setting is deep enough, our blade isn't that dull, we should be fine. Loaded. We're going to take our design and we're going to do one thing. We're going to apply an outside stroke that is a very particular color. And this stroke is going to tell the machine, hey, please cut this line, do not print it. This is a very specific kind of magenta, and you might visualize it as a magenta, but the computer just reads it as some lines of code that tell it to cut. To find this swatch, you have to go into your either strokes, go to the libraries panel, go to other library, and it should be located on the desktop as Roland VersaWorks. And this is going to open up a new panel, and what we want from that panel is this magenta right here, labeled Cut Contour. So we're going to take our outside stroke, and we're going to apply. There we go. I'm going to move this away. Now as you can see, this is now a magenta line, and even though we might again see it as magenta, the computer reads it as a cut line. Okay. Now the second thing we have to do is we have to make sure our artboard is as small as possible so that we can print our stickers as close together as we can, because the machine doesn't know that we're not using this space. It thinks that everything there is what is being printed. So this looks pretty okay. I'm just going to shift it over a little bit, as well as our artboard. Okay. Now that we have our design, our little cut path, we're going to go to File, Save As. Now this printer only reads PDFs, so make sure that whenever you're done, you save this as a PDF. There we go. Now it's saved as a PDF. It doesn't matter what kind of preset you use. So now I'm going to open the Roland VersaWorks program, and that looks like a little blue icon with a little white curly V, and it's located on the taskbar. And that's now going to open up Roland VersaWorks. And what I'm going to do from here is I'm going to go to File, Add to Job Queue. It doesn't matter which one you add it to. It could be either one. Any of them. Yikes, this might take a minute. I forgot where I saved it. Okay. And there's our PDF called Print. That is our design. I'm going to get rid of this one. Okay. So here's where the actual printer work begins. To access the settings of this job, you can double click on it. You can right click and go to settings, or you can go all the way to the bottom of the page and click on the gear icon, and that is also settings. So I'm going to go ahead and open the settings for this. Okay. There's only 3 things you need to do here. The first being you have to make sure that the size of this space is actually what you have on the printer. And as we saw before, that was 52 inches was the width, but we can see here it's not 52. So to get that from the computer, from the machine, you just click Get Media Width, and that'll load whatever was displaying on that screen. Okay. Next, because all of this white space over here gets wasted, we usually tend to fill it. So I'm just going to add a bunch of copies until that whole roll is filled. Next, because we have a vinyl in here, we have to go to the quality panel, go to media type, and vinyl is already loaded, but this is where you would have selected what kind it was. There's no difference between standard and high quality in terms of time, so we're just going to select that instead. And as a side note, I want to make sure that we're actually cutting something and that we're not actually just printing a magenta line. So I'm going to zoom in to see the marching ants that are there. And as we can see, they are there, so it is going to cut. So I'm going to now hit OK, and then I'm going to hit print, and print again, and it's going to start our print. That's it. Print is done, and it's done cutting. We're going to take out the media clamps so that we can sheet cut this. If you do not take out these media clamps, the machine does not know and will try to cut over them. So please remove the media clamps if you use them. And to release them, all you do is press down on this little flap here and then pull them out. Okay, now I'm going to close this lid right here. I'm going to go over to the menu again. I'm going to go to Function and Sheet Cut. And then I'm going to enter. It's going to send the motor across, it's going to ramp up, and then it's going to tear it. And from there we can just pull it off and go over to our table. We can remove the outside. We have our media sheet cut. I'm going to take one of these stickers and make it presentable, just in case we were doing this for a client. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out the border. Okay. I'm going to take this X-Acto blade. I'm going to pierce one of the corners so that we can remove this top layer from the backing while leaving our sticker on it. There you go. Once it's separated, you just peel it off. All right. And there you go. There's the finished product.